안녕하세요. 오늘 날씨 진짜 좋네요.
네, 정말요. 기분까지 상쾌해지는 것 같아요.
이런 날은 잠시 일 멈추고 저희랑 재미있는 얘기 속으로 좀 빠져보시는 거 어떨까요?
좋죠.
특히 지난 비트코인 서울 2025 컨퍼런스 정말 뜨거웠잖아요.
네, 열기가 대단했죠.
혹시 아쉽게 참석 못하셨거나 현장에서 뭘 놓쳤나? 아니면 핵심 내용 다시 좀 복귀하고 싶다. 이런 분들 계실 것 같아서요.
네. 오늘 딱 그런 분들을 위해 준비한 거죠.
맞아요. 비트코인 서울 2025 그중에서도 특히 기업들의 움직임. 이걸 좀 깊게 들여다보려고 합니다.
네, 바로 그 기업 비트코인 재무전략 패널토크 세션 말씀이시죠.
네, 맞습니다.
유럽, 홍콩, 또 아시아 각지에서 실제로 기업 대차 대조표에 비트코인을 넣어서 운영하는 리더들이 직접 나왔잖아요.
정말 귀한 자리였죠. 생생한 경험담.
네, 그분들 전략이랑 경험을 직접 들을 수 있어서 저도 참 흥미로웠습니다. 오늘 저희 목표는 그 논의에서 나왔던 핵심들, 가장 중요한 통찰들을 뽑아서 여러분께 잘 전달해 드리는 거예요.
좋습니다. 그리고 본격적으로 시작하기 전에요. 혹시 리포트 보셨어요? 세계의 파도가 몰고 오는 하나의 미래.
네, 그거요.
오늘 저희 다룰 내용이랑 좀 맥락이 닿는 부분이 있어서요. 혹시 시간 되시면 이 방송 듣기 전에 한번 읽어보시면 기업들 전략 이해하는데 훨씬 도움이 되실 거예요.
좋은 팁이네요.
자, 그럼 이제 진짜로 파고들어보죠. 기업들이 왜 그리고 어쩌다가 비트코인을 그냥 사두는 게 아니라 재무전략의 한가운데 두기 시작했는지.
네, 그게 핵심 변화죠. 단순히 가지고 있다가 아니라 전략적으로 쓴다. 여기서 일본 메타플래닝 얘기가 계속 나왔는데요.
그 성공 사례.
네. 근데 이게 그냥 성공했다. 이걸 넘어서요. 그 작은 시가총액 회사가 비트코인 전략 하나로 도쿄 증시 최고 성과 주식이 됐다는 거.
네, 엄청났죠.
이게 뭘 보여주냐면 비트코인이 회사의 가치 평가 방식 자체를 바꿀 수 있다는 거예요. 근본적으로요. 그리고 이건 대기업뿐 아니라 중소기업에도 해당된다는 강력한 증거가 된 거죠.
그 점이 흥미롭네요. 그냥 비트코인 사서 주가 올랐다 이게 아니라 시장이 그 기업을 보는 눈 자체가 달라진다는 거군요.
그렇죠. 밸류에이션 방식에 영향을 주는 거죠.
그러면 패널들이 각자 다른 지역에서 활동하니까 접근 방식도 좀 달랐을 것 같은데요. 규제가 다르면 전략도 다를 수밖에 없잖아요.
정확합니다. 규제 환경이 전략을 어떻게 만드는지 보는 게 아주 재밌는 포인트였어요. 예를 들어 유럽의 더 블록체인 그룹.
네.
거기는 주당 비트코인 보유량 극대화. 목표가 아주 명확해요.
오, 명확하네요.
네, 이걸 위해서 룩셈부르크 법인을 딱 세우고 비트코인 표시 전환 사채 같은 거 상당히 좀 정교하고 혁신적인 금융상품을 만들더라고요. 프랑스 규제 당국이랑도 긴밀하게 협력하고요.
와, 상당히 금융 중심적이네요, 유럽은.
네, 그런 느낌이었어요.
근데 홍콩의 HK 아시아 홀딩스는 좀 결이 다른 것 같던데요. 약간 더 사업적인 느낌.
맞아요. 거기는 기존에 있던 통신사업 문잉크라고 있었죠.
네, 인수했죠.
그걸 인수한 다음에 이걸 발판 삼아서 비트코인 직불카드 같은 실제 상품을 출시하고 더 나아가서는 중국 시장까지 보더라고요.
야, 스케일이 크네요.
네, 그리고 또 직접 비트코인 컨퍼런스도 열면서 커뮤니티 만들려는 노력도 하고 있었고요. M&A를 통한 시너지 전략인 셈이죠.
인수합병을 활용하는군요. 그럼 아시아 전반을 보는 소라벤처스는요? 거긴 더 복잡했을 것 같은데?
네, 거기가 이제 과제가 제일 많아 보였어요. 아시아 지역 규제가 아무래도 유럽이나 홍콩보다 좀 더 엄격한 면이 있거든요.
그렇죠. 나라마다 다르기도 하고.
그래서 단순히 우리 비트코인 한다 이것만 외치기보다는 기존 사업이랑 시너지를 확실히 보여줘야 하고 또 그 비트코인 매거진이랑 제휴한 것처럼 시장에서 좀 신뢰받는 플레이어의 역할 이게 중요하다고 강조하더라고요.
신뢰도 구축이 중요하군요.
네, 그래서 일본, 홍콩, 태국 여러 나라에서 성공 사례를 하나씩 만들면서 지역적인 신뢰도를 쌓아가는 중이다 이렇게 밝혔어요. 규제라는 벽을 넘으려고 정말 다각도로 노력하는 모습이었죠.
와, 진짜 실제 운영에는 고려할 게 한두 가지가 아니네요. 듣는 분들 입장에서는 아마 그래서 안전한가? 이 질문이 제일 궁금할 것 같아요.
당연하죠.
특히 비트코인 보관, 커스터디 문제요.
네, 가장 핵심적인 부분이죠. 이거는 패널들이 다 똑같이 얘기했어요. 규제 당국 관리 감독을 받는 은행이나 아니면 정말 믿을 수 있는 전문 커스터디 업체를 써야 한다. 이건 필수다.
기본 중에 기본이다.
네, 그렇죠. 비트코인을 안전하게 지키는 거, 그게 안 되면 다른 전략이고 뭐고 의미가 없으니까요. 근데 지갑 주소 공개 여부에 대해서는 좀 신중하더라고요.
공개하면 투명해서 좋을 것 같은데.
근데 그 마이클 세일러 의견이 인용하면서 기술적인 해킹 위험보다 오히려 거래 패턴이 노출돼서 생기는 조직적인 위험, 예를 들면 뭐 선행 매매 같은 거요.
그런 위험이.
네, 그걸 더 우려하는 입장이었어요. 그 투명성이랑 보안 사이에서 적절한 균형점을 찾는 게 여전히 좀 과제인 것 같더라고요.
그렇군요. 무조건 다 공개하는 게 답은 아니네요. 그럼 마지막으로는요. 투자자 입장에서 이런 기업들, 비트코인 전략 쓰는 기업들을 평가할 때 뭘 좀 중점적으로 봐야 할까요? 어떤 기준 같은 거요?
마침 더 블록체인 그룹 대표가 딱 4가지 기준을 제시했어요. 투자자들 보라고.
오, 뭔가요?
첫째, 진짜 비트코인에만 집중하냐. 다른 알트코인 없이 오직 비트코인 순수 플레이어냐. 이거고요.
네.
둘째, 비트코인을 그냥 단기 해주 수단이 아니라 핵심적인 장기 보유 자산으로 보느냐.
장기적인 관점.
그렇죠. 셋째, 아까 말한 주당 비트코인 보유량 극대화, 이 목표에 얼마나 충실하냐.
네.
그리고 넷째, 이게 좀 흥미로운데 주식시장에서 얻은 프리미엄 있잖아요. 시가총액 늘어난 거. 이걸 얼마나 빨리 다시 비트코인 매입으로 연결해서 가치를 쌓아가느냐.
수익화해서 바로 재투자하는 속도.
네, 이 4가지를 보면 그 기업 전략의 진정성이랑 효율성을 판단할 수 있다. 이렇게 조언했어요.
와, 정말 명확한 기준이네요. 오늘 얘기 쭉 나눠보니까 진짜 각기 다른 규제와 시장 환경 속에서도 기업들이 되게 창의적으로 길을 찾아 나서는 모습이 인상 깊어요, 저는.
그렇죠. 약간 뭐랄까 비트코인이라는 신대륙을 향해서 각자 막 항로를 개척하는 탐험가들 그런 느낌도 좀 들고요.
저는 되게 전통적인 영역이잖아요. 기업 재무 관리라는 게. 네, 그렇죠.
여기에 비트코인이라는 완전히 새로운 자산이 들어오면서 생기는 여러 질문들. 예를 들면 규제 당국이랑 어떻게 소통할 거냐, 투자자 보호는 어떻게 할 거냐, 또 혁신적인 금융상품의 가능성은 뭐고 위험은 뭐냐. 이런 것들을 현장 목소리로 직접 들을 수 있었다는 게 참 흥미로웠어요. 이게 고려할 층위가 정말 복잡하고 깊구나 다시 한번 느꼈습니다.
네, 맞아요. 오늘 저희가 나눈 이 이야기가요. 비트코인 서울 2025 혹시 놓치셨거나 아니면 다시 한번 좀 곱씹어보고 싶으셨던 분들께 또 기업들의 비트코인 전략이 대체 뭔가 궁금했던 분들께 좀 유용한 정보가 되었기를 바랍니다.
앞으로 특히 한국을 포함해서 아시아 시장에서 이런 움직임이 어떻게 더 구체화될지 또 확산될지 지켜보는 거 이게 정말 흥미로운 관전 포인트가 될 겁니다. 오늘 저희 얘기가 여러분 각자의 어떤 투자나 비즈니스에 또 다른 질문, 또 다른 영감을 던져드렸기를 기대해봅니다.
네, 그럼 오늘은 여기서 마무리하도록 하겠습니다. 다음에 더 흥미로운 주제로 다시 찾아뵙겠습니다.
네, 감사합니다.
Welcome to the deep dive. We're taking you straight back today, right into the energy of Bitcoin Seoul 2025.
Yeah, it really had a buzz, didn't it? You could feel the future of finance kind of unfolding there.
Absolutely. So for those of you who maybe couldn't make it to Seoul, or if you were there and just want a good recap, this deep dive is definitely for you. We're going to unpack one of the sessions that got a lot of talk, the panel on corporate Bitcoin treasury strategies.
Right, and this wasn't just like abstract ideas. These are real companies making real moves, putting Bitcoin onto their balance sheets, big strategic decisions.
Exactly. So our mission today is to really distill the key takeaways, the most important nuggets of knowledge from that discussion.
And we'll guide you through it. Our deep dive is based entirely on what was shared by, honestly, a fantastic panel. We heard from Alexander Rizzo of the Blockchain Group,
Right.
John Riggins from HK Asia Holdings and Moon Inc., and Jason Fang, founding partner at Sora Ventures and UTXO Management. Kim Go-yoon from Happy Block did a great job moderating, too.
Yeah, these are really the folks leading the charge, figuring out how Bitcoin fits into corporate finance. So get ready. You might discover some pretty surprising facts and maybe have a few aha moments as we explore what they're doing.
And we won't just cover the what, but really dig into the why it matters. We'll help you connect these strategies to, the bigger picture of global finance.
Okay, let's dive in then. First off, why? Why are these global companies, from Europe, Asia, suddenly so keen on putting Bitcoin on their balance sheets? What's the big idea?
Well, it really boils down to a new strategic playbook for corporates. These panelists, they're right at the forefront, building what are essentially Bitcoin treasury companies.
Bitcoin treasury companies, okay.
Yeah, and the goal often is pretty clear. Maximize Bitcoin per share. They fundamentally see Bitcoin as a superior treasury asset compared to, traditional fiat currency.
That's a pretty radical departure from standard corporate treasury management.
It is. It's optimizing the balance sheet in a way that, frankly, public companies haven't really done before.
So who are these innovators then? And are they actually seeing success? What's the impact so far?
Okay, let's start in Europe with Alexandre Rizzo from the Blockchain Group. They're basically Europe's first mover and now the largest Bitcoin treasury company over there.
First and largest, got it.
They kicked off this strategy officially back in November 2024. And get this, they've achieved something like a 2,000% performance in the market since then.
Wow, 2,000%. That's huge.
It's remarkable. They currently hold 1,471 Bitcoin on their balance sheet. And their stated focus, very clearly, is maximizing Bitcoin per share over time. It's not just buying it, it's making that accumulation the core driver of shareholder value.
That 2,000% figure, though, how did that happen so fast? What were the key factors, do you think?
Well, Alexandra mentioned their model was simple. Raise capital specifically to buy Bitcoin. It was very clear, very direct.
No ambiguity.
Exactly. They weren't just, dipping a toe in. It was their mission.
Yeah.
And that clarity, combined with being early, seems to have really resonated with a certain type of investor looking for that specific exposure.
Makes sense. Okay, let's shift to Asia. Jason Fang from Sora Ventures and UTXO Management. He was involved in a Japanese company, Metaplanet, right? That story is quite something.
Oh, Metaplanet is a fascinating case study. They started out small, like a $15 million market cap.
Okay.
And now they're valued somewhere between $2 and $4 billion.
Billion from 15 million. How?
What's really interesting is they funded this purely through stock products. Jason called it one of the most successful implementations for a public company. And it's catching on. He mentioned 4 other listed companies in Japan, Hong Kong, Thailand, and the US are now basically copying the Metaplanet playbook.
So it shows that even smaller companies can leverage Bitcoin's global market, its appeal, to raise capital and reach valuations maybe wouldn't have been possible otherwise.
Exactly. It totally changes the game for who can participate. It's not just for the established giants.
That's a really powerful point. Okay, and then there's John Riggins with HK Asia Holdings and Moon Inc. His focus is Hong Kong.
Yes, John's strategy is very geographically focused. He's targeting Hong Kong specifically as a gateway, really, to get Bitcoin exposure for the broader Chinese market.
Interesting angle.
They acquired a company called Moon Inc. in Hong Kong specifically to roll out this Treasury playbook. They've acquired 30 Bitcoin so far.
Okay, 30 BTC. That sounds small compared to the blockchain group.
It does initially, but the goal is clear. Rapid accumulation. They want to significantly increase China's Bitcoin exposure through this Hong Kong entity. It's a very deliberate, market-specific play.
So it's not just the starting number, like with Metaplanet starting small. It's the potential for growth within that strategic framework.
Precisely. It's about the intent and the ability to scale, especially if the market and regulatory environment is supportive.
Right, which brings us to regulations. That's always the tricky part, isn't it? How do these companies handle the very different rules across Europe and Asia? It must be a maze.
It definitely raises that crucial question. How do you even talk to regulators about something this new? It's not just ticking compliance boxes. It sounds like it requires active collaboration, even education. They're almost shaping the rules as they go.
So what was Alexandre Rizzo's experience in France? How did European regulators react?
Alexandre said the blockchain group worked directly with local French regulators right from the beginning. And apparently, the regulators were, quote, very impressed with the straightforward model, raise money, buy Bitcoin.
Okay, that's positive.
He also mentioned MiCA, Europe's big crypto regulation framework. While it poses challenges for things like stablecoins, he said it's actually very clear when it comes to Bitcoin custody. Bitcoin's treated differently, which lets treasury companies operate quite freely.
That's a key distinction under MiCA then.
It seems so. And they've even innovated further. They set up a special entity, an SPV, in Luxembourg to create the first Bitcoin-denominated convertible bonds.
Bitcoin bonds, how does that work?
It essentially allows them to raise, as he put it, unlimited amounts of Bitcoin without credit risk. It gives investors better downside protection but still captures the upside. He literally said they can skip fiat and live directly on the Bitcoin standard.
Skip fiat. That's a phrase you don't hear every day in corporate finance. Okay, how about Hong Kong? John Riggins described it as quite forward-thinking.
Yeah, John called Hong Kong a very pioneering country. They were one of the first places, remember, to launch spot Bitcoin ETFs.
Right, that was big news.
And he stressed that the regulators and exchanges there are very good at communicating with companies like his. Moon Inc. is actively educating regulators on the MicroStrategy play.
Explaining that whole corporate treasury conversion strategy pioneered by Michael Saylor.
Exactly, showing how it works, the rationale. They're even hosting a Bitcoin conference in Hong Kong this August to help the local market understand and hopefully embrace these kinds of products.
Proactive education. And Jason Fang, dealing with other Asian markets, Japan, Taiwan, Thailand, Korea. How does that compare? You mentioned the U.S. seems more open.
Jason confirmed that, yeah. He said the U.S. has effectively no limits on corporates buying Bitcoin, whereas Asian markets generally have very strict regulations.
So his job is harder in a way.
His role, as he sees it, is to create opportunities for that MicroStrategy model across Asia's major markets. The key thing for regulators there, he emphasized, is seeing a proven track record.
They want proof it works and isn't just speculative.
Right, and proof of good intentions that it's not some quick pump-and-dump scheme. Metaplanet's success was huge for building that trust. Interestingly, he mentioned that having a foreign CEO, an Australian-Taiwanese individual, actually helped instill new trust in Japan, where the stock market has had its struggles.
That's a fascinating cultural nuance. So it really shows these companies aren't just, following rules. They're actively working to shape understanding and build confidence.
Absolutely. They're paving the way, really.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Beyond just buying and holding Bitcoin, you mentioned something else, Cleb. They're integrating it into their actual businesses, creating synergies.
Exactly. It's not just a treasury play. Which raises the question, how do these other activities help their main goal of maximizing Bitcoin per share? It's about making the Bitcoin work for the business, not just sit there.
Let's look at Moon Inc. in Hong Kong again. John Reagan's strategy seems like a perfect example.
It really is. John explained they acquired an existing, very successful telecommunications operation in Hong Kong. They do SIM cards, prepaid products, that sort of thing.
Okay, a traditional telco business.
Right. But they see huge potential to boost that business by injecting Bitcoin. They're envisioning things like Bitcoin debit cards, Bitcoin credit cards, Bitcoin products, specifically for people in Hong Kong.
So using Bitcoin to enhance an existing service and potentially attract new customers.
Precisely. It strengthens the balance sheet and the operating business lines. It's a dual benefit.
Smart. What about the blockchain group in France? Are they doing similar things?
Well, Alexandra was clear their main focus is still maximizing BTC per share through raising capital. But he confirmed they also run two profitable side businesses that feed into that mission.
Okay, what are they?
One is called Ergo and Triumph. They do custom web development, but also blockchain-based development, specifically building Bitcoin-based financial applications.
So building tools for the ecosystem.
Yeah. And the other company develops business intelligence solutions using data and AI. They see AI as crucial for the future. These ventures generate extra revenue, which helps them accumulate more Bitcoin over time, while also contributing to the broader infrastructure.
And Jason Fang, with Sora Ventures in Asia, his vision seems even broader.
It really does. Jason's actively bringing Bitcoin resources into new Asian markets. They've invested in, I think he said, 8 media portfolio companies, things like Bitcoin podcasts, Chinese language, crypto media. They also host conferences like the Swara Summit in Taiwan.
Building the information infrastructure, too.
Exactly. And he stressed again, for public companies in Asia, it's very important for regulators to see a link to a traditional business.
Like Moon Inc.'s telco.
Right. Or he mentioned a conference business in Thailand getting a Bitcoin business license, and even Metaplanet having a Bitcoin hotel concept. It grounds the Bitcoin strategy in something tangible and familiar, which helps with regulatory comfort and market acceptance.
So the takeaway here is pretty clear. These aren't just passive Bitcoin holders. They're actively building ecosystems, leveraging existing businesses, all to fuel that core Bitcoin accumulation strategy. It's really holistic.
It's a much more integrated approach than maybe people realize.
Okay, let's tackle the elephant in the room now, risk. Obviously, dealing with digital assets, especially at a corporate scale, brings up huge questions about security, transparency, what are the main worries, and how are these companies handling them?
Yeah, that's critical. How do you keep investors confident when you're holding something like Bitcoin, known for its volatility? It really seems to come down to having robust systems, clear communication, and importantly, working within established financial structures.
So specifically on custody, holding all that Bitcoin securely, how do they do that?
Well, they emphasized working with regulated partners. Alexandra mentioned using Drewback in France, which is apparently a bank funded way back in 2011 by Bitcoin OGs.
Oh, interesting.
And also major regulated banks in Switzerland and Luxembourg. The key, they stressed, is using things like multi-signature processes and security. No single person can just move the funds.
Makes sense. Standard best practice, really. What about the debate around showing public wallet addresses, like MicroStrategy does? Did they address that?
They did. The view, echoing Michael Saylor's own comments, was that the main risk isn't really technical, like worrying about quantum computers cracking keys, which they called very theoretical.
So what's the real risk then?
They framed it as a human organization risk. If you reveal all your transaction patterns, your timing, who you're dealing with, counterparties, it could potentially expose your team or operations to risk, maybe physical risk or social engineering.
Oh, okay. Operational security, not just technical.
Exactly. They argued that ultimate security comes from working with those regulated system banks and having strong internal controls, not just putting an address out there. The transparency needs to be balanced with operational security.
That's a really important distinction. Okay, what about transparency for regulators and auditors, especially for public companies?
Jason Fang shared a great example here with Metaplanet in Japan. He said they actually worked with Japanese regulators for 6 months to get the quarterly reporting standards changed.
Changed how?
For the first time ever in Japan's stock market history, companies can now include a specific Bitcoin category in their official financial reports.
Wow, that's a huge win for clarity.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it underlines how important it is to have good auditors, the big four firms, who understand how to audit Bitcoin holdings properly. That provides the necessary trust for investors and regulators alike. It sets a precedent.
Definitely. Okay, one more risk factor, though maybe more of a financial dynamic. Interest rates. How do they affect these strategies?
Yeah, that came up as a key difference between regions. In places like Japan and Taiwan, interest rates are super low. Jason mentioned you can basically collateralize your shares for maybe 3% interest, or even basically free money.
Which makes borrowing to buy Bitcoin very cheap.
Extremely attractive, exactly. It provides low-cost capital to fuel the Treasury strategy. But then you look at Hong Kong, where John Riggins operates, and interest rates are fairly high. So that specific funding strategy, borrowing against shares, just isn't as viable there.
So the macro environment really shapes the specific tactics they can use.
Absolutely. It shows that navigating this whole Bitcoin Treasury space requires more than just deciding to buy Bitcoin. It involves strategic partnerships, educating regulators, and really understanding these global financial nuances that affect how you fund the whole operation.
Okay, so bringing this all together. For companies maybe in Korea or really anywhere thinking about taking this kind of strategic dive into Bitcoin, what are the key lessons? What should they look for?
The panelists gave some pretty direct advice, especially thinking about new entrants. Jason Fang, for instance, specifically mentioned Korea. He believes it's one of the most important markets in Asia for Bitcoin adoption and fully expects to see Korean-listed companies start buying Bitcoin.
Right, and he laid out 3 specific things to look for when evaluating a company doing this, didn't he?
He did, and there are really crucial points for anyone trying to understand the space. First, he said it's absolutely critical the company focuses only on Bitcoin, no other crypto assets.
Why such a strict focus?
Because, as he put it, other crypto assets could potentially go to zero. He really emphasized that single-minded focus on Bitcoin itself. Second, the company needs to commit its long-term capital entirely to Bitcoin. It can't just be a small hedge.
Not just diversification, but a core position.
Exactly. He used this great analogy. If you had to choose between holding, say, Zimbabwean dollars or US dollars for the long term, you wouldn't just hedge 5% of your Zimbabwean dollars with USD. You'd put everything in dollar.
Because one has a fixed supply, the other potentially unlimited.
Precisely. He argued Bitcoin, fixed supply versus fiat, unlimited supply, means Bitcoin doesn't really have a peak because fiat has no floor. It reframes the whole concept. And third, look for companies genuinely focused on maximizing Bitcoin per share. That should be their guiding metric.
Okay, those are clear evaluation criteria. And wasn't there a specific metric mentioned from Adam Back?
Yeah. Yes, a useful indicator attributed to Adam Back. It measures how many months or days it takes for a company to basically capture the premium between its stock market value, market cap, and the actual value of the Bitcoin it holds. Its net asset value, or NAV, at the time it bought the Bitcoin.
So it shows how quickly their Bitcoin strategy translates into increased share price.
Essentially, yes. It's a way to gauge how efficiently they're monetizing their Bitcoin holdings for shareholders.
So what this all means for you, the listener, is that these aren't just, technical finance details. They're really crucial insights if you want to truly grasp the value, the risks, and the strategic thinking behind these corporate Bitcoin moves. We've covered a lot today. It feels like we really took a fantastic deep dive, revisiting those cutting-edge talks from Bitcoin Seoul 2025. It's been quite a journey through the strategies, the hurdles, and the innovations driving corporate Bitcoin adoption around the world.
It really has. We've seen how these companies aren't just passively adopting Bitcoin, they're actively shaping its role in corporate finance, from navigating and sometimes changing regulations to building these integrated business models. It's quite pioneering work.
For me, reflecting on it, what really stands out is just the sheer ingenuity. It's not just the cleverness of acquiring Bitcoin, but how they're doing it, collaborating with regulators, involving their actual day-to-day businesses. It just shows how dynamic this whole space is. It's way beyond just buying an asset.
Yeah, I agree. And for me, maybe it's the emphasis on finding that balance between transparency and security, the focus on regulated custody, the thoughtful discussion about public addresses versus operational risk. It highlights that building real trust and long-term adoption comes from robust systems and clear communication, not just, hype. It feels like a maturing approach.
Definitely. So as you think about everything we've discussed today, here's a final thought, perhaps. If major global corporations are strategically rethinking their core treasuries, choosing Bitcoin, what does that really imply about the future of value, of investment, maybe even the concept of money itself? And what opportunities might that shift unlock for you?
That's the big question, isn't it? We'd really encourage you to keep exploring these topics. You can follow companies like the Blockchain Group, HK Asia Holdings, Sora Ventures, and see how these strategies play out in real time.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.